They still boiled socks to make them last longer. Tea was served with powdered milk, and entire families shared one bath once a week, if there was hot water. In the Britain of the late 1940s, peace had arrived, but comfort hadn't. The war's shadow lingered in every cupboard and quiet evening. Yet from the rubble rose council houses, from ration books came the NHS, and from silence, the first songs of rock and roll. Britain wasn't healed, but it was rebuilding. Between worn-out boots and blackout curtains, a new kind of life was quietly beginning to grow. In 1945, after 6 years of war, Britain finally celebrated victory. The country erupted in joy. Crowds flooded Trafalgar Square, strangers hugged, and children waved makeshift flags. But beneath the celebration was a quiet exhaustion. Cities were bombed, homes were gone, and food was still scarce. The war had ended, but its shadow clung tightly to daily life. Rationing didn't disappear with the Nazis. Bread, butter, and meat were still tightly controlled. Families queued with their ration books, trading coupons for staples. Even weddings and birthdays were modest affairs, often relying on borrowed clothes and shared recipes. Victory didn't taste sweet. It was dry, powdered, and measured by the ounce. People hoped for change, but the streets told a slower story. Craters remained where homes once stood. Children played among rubble, mothers cooked with creativity, and fathers searched for steady work. Britain was proud, but painfully tired. In 1948, something extraordinary happened. The National Health Service was born, giving every citizen access to free medical care, no matter their income. For the first time, people could see a doctor, have surgery, or give birth in a hospital without worrying about the bill. The reaction was overwhelming. Queues formed outside dental clinics and hospitals across the country. Children had rotting teeth pulled, glasses prescribed, and chronic illnesses treated, all in a matter of weeks. It was a moment of hope, a sign that the sacrifices of war had built something lasting. The NHS wasn't perfect, but it reshaped the nation's identity. It said, "You matter, your health matters, and this country will care for you." For many, it was the first tangible sign that life was getting better. Just weeks after victory, in 1945, Winston Churchill lost the general election. The war hero was voted out, and Clement Attlee's Labour Party took over. It wasn't a rejection of Churchill's leadership. It was a call for change, for homes, jobs, fairness, and something new. Labour acted fast. National industries were created. Welfare benefits expanded. The foundations of a new Britain, built on equality, support, and social justice, took shape almost overnight. The government believed the people had earned more than thanks. They deserved a better life. For working-class families, it felt like a promise finally being kept. A nation battered by bombs was being rebuilt with compassion at the centre, not with slogans, but with policies. By 1946, millions of families were still homeless. Wartime bombs had destroyed over 2 million homes, and returning soldiers needed roofs over their heads. Britain responded with urgency. Prefabricated houses, known as prefabs, were erected in empty fields and bomb sites. These small metal homes weren't fancy, but they had hot running water, indoor toilets, and their own gardens, and luxuries for many. Neighbours bonded quickly, borrowing sugar and chatting over hedges. The prefab became a symbol of survival and new beginnings. Though temporary by design, many lasted decades. Children grew up there, planted trees in the backyards, and remembered them with fondness. They weren't perfect, but they were home. Even in 1950, 5 years after peace, rationing was still part of life. Meat, sugar, tea, even clothes were limited. Britons made do with recipes like mock goose and powdered eggs. Creativity ruled the kitchen, and waste not, want not wasn't a saying. It was survival. Despite the hardship, morale remained strong. Communities came together. Children shared sweets on the playground, and people exchanged tips on stretching ingredients. Life was hard, but people refused to be bitter. The war had united the country, and even in peacetime austerity, that sense of unity remained. There was dignity in thrift, and hope in every fresh loaf of bread. In 1952, a young woman returned home from Kenya to the devastating news that her father, King George VI, had died. Just 25 years old, Princess Elizabeth became queen. The nation held its breath as it watched her step into history. A year later, in 1953, Britain gathered around television sets, still rare, still precious, to witness her coronation. For many, it was the first major national event broadcast live, and the sight of the gold coach, the crown, and the young monarch brought tears and awe. Her ascension was more than tradition. It was a signal that the country was entering a new era. After years of war and recovery, there was finally a moment to dream again. In 1956, Britain faced shortages of coal and power that led to the introduction of blackouts and the three-day working week. Factories, offices and homes dimmed their lights to save energy. Evening plans were cancelled, radios went silent, and families shuffled to bed earlier than usual, remembering the wartime rhythms of sacrifice and adaptation. Despite the gloom, evening gatherings continued in candlelight. Neighbours swapped stories, children did homework by lamplight, and teacups warmed hands against the chill. It wasn't only inconvenience, it was a reminder of collective endurance. By restoring light only temporarily, the blackouts revealed a resilient spirit. Britain learned again that in hardship, communities shine their brightest. In 1948, the arrival of the ship HMT Empire Windrush brought Caribbean migrants to Britain's shores. They came to help rebuild, filling vital jobs in health, transport and services. Their arrival planted seeds for a new multicultural Britain. They faced hostility but kept going, introducing calypso, Sunday best dresses and Sunday roasts with spice. They built churches, guested in local schools, and their children grew up British but rooted elsewhere. Windrush people became pioneers, transforming Britain into a place of shared cultures and changing the meaning of what it was to be British. Rock and skiffle begins. In 1957, guitars were picked up, and slapping upright bass became something to dance to. A new sound, skiffle, captured street corners and youth clubs. Ordinary teenagers discovered rhythm and hope in simple chords and chords in cans. That sound paved the way to rock and roll, making way for local bands and future legends. Skiffle drove people out of their seats and into a musical revolution nobody expected. Music wasn't just entertainment. It was the first taste of freedom for a generation ready to make their own noise. Skiffle had its roots in American jug band music, where homemade instruments like washboards and tea-chest basses were the norm. But in post-war Britain, it found new life. Inexpensive and easy to play, skiffle instruments gave working-class teens a voice and a way to form bands without formal training. The movement spread rapidly through youth clubs, schools, and even street corners, igniting the early spark of a cultural rebellion. What everyday object would you turn into an instrument to join a skiffle band today? In 1956, what should have been a diplomatic negotiation turned into a military crisis in Egypt. Britain, France, and Israel launched action to regain control of the Suez Canal, but the world watched in horror at images on TV. The crisis revealed Britain's declining global power. Streets in London were tense, voices were raised in Parliament, and newspapers asked whether Britain had overreached. The Queen urged calm. Messages of caution appeared in homes, and many realised the world was changing fast. Suez was a wake-up call. Britain's voice no longer echoed uncontested across the globe. In 1958, an unexpected revolution happened at home. The first pizza arrived on British doorsteps, and toys began to glow with plastic and technology. Families crowded around new radio bargains and toy adverts, hunger for novelty replacing wartime scarcity. Evening by evening, board games and coffee table gatherings became rituals, with toys shaped like spaceships and plastic pieces. Shops filled with colour and promise, hinting at the flair of the coming decade. It was a time when home felt modern and a little bit magical. By the end of 1954, the last ration was lifted, and a single life cup of butter, bacon, or sweets was back on sale. Families gathered to celebrate with real sugar tea parties, a treat that once would have been a victory. No longer counted in coupons, food became an expression of freedom again. Chefs experimented, children celebrated, and every plate told a story of post-war recovery. Food budgets grew and tables brightened. The years of scarcity were turning into years of taste. In the late 50s, council estates sprouted on former bomb sites. Whole communities moved into modern houses with bathrooms and gardens, symbols of progress and comfort. People planted flowers, installed radios, and imagined futures beyond their front doors. There was laughter in backyards, children's voices in the street, and parents meeting over fences. It was the decade of settling down, of home ownership as a dream made possible. From rubble and tents rose neighbourhoods that carried Britain towards tomorrow. Although full-colour television would come later, by 1959, early experiments and broadcasts teased a vivid future. While most still watched black and white, the promise of colour screens captured imaginations. Families gathered to glimpse the future in broken lines of colour. And even then, it felt like a spark during Sunday afternoon shows. Children asked about moving pictures in colour, and advertisers began to dream of new possibilities. It was a quiet announcement. The way we saw our world was about to change forever. The 50s carved a new Britain from the ruins of war. It was a decade of recovery, innovation, identity building, and silent revolutions, from health and homes to rhythms and rights. Each thread in that web told a story of hope. They didn't make the headlines, but they shaped entire lives and entire futures. One privilege after another was reclaimed. Which of these moments connects to your story or your family's memories? They didn't call it resilience back then. It was just life. You fixed what was broken, shared what little you had, and carried on. Post-war Britain may have looked grey and battered, but inside every home there was colour. In the laughter of children, the smell of Sunday roast, and the hum of a new song on the radio. Those years weren't perfect. Slow, tender, sometimes harsh, but they laid the foundations of today's NHS, public housing, education and cultural freedom. Piece by piece, like a patchwork quilt, stitched by millions, they shaped the country we know. If a memory surfaced, your grandmother's apron, your father's first car, or a forgotten taste, share it in the comments. Because remembering together is how we keep it alive.